I'm ready. I'm going to start by saying, when I chose the pieces that I'm going to show you tonight, there's absolutely no continuity to them. They're random from various decades and time and space and places where I was in my long career. So don't look for anything harmonious here. I just picked ones that I thought you guys would like and that I especially liked. The first part of the program will be showing my etchings. And I hope that you had a chance to see that little tape of what an etching is in 4 minutes. The 4 minutes that you saw can occupy me for many months. It's very complex. It's got many, many variables. And I'd rather not answer technical questions tonight, but I will in the future. But I don't want to take the time to do that. Let's begin with this first and quite recent etching called the Theater District in the time of COVID. And it's pretty self-explanatory. I hope you can see the little garbage man in the lower left.
Yes.
The lone figure walking down the empty street devoid of people or lights or activity. And it was part of a series that I did called New York at 7. That was part of the posters that you saw, where I took different spots in New York, an apartment house with people on the fire escapes, clanging pots, playing the violin, singing. And this is just a continuation of this piece. It's a little bit somber, but it was meant to be. My assistant is going to be changing things as we go. This is a fun one. Are you able to see it all?
Yes, yeah, I can see it. Actually, maybe if you could move it a little closer to the camera. Is that possible? Yeah, I can see it fine.
All right. Well, you probably all know this famous landmark is called Flowers at the Met. I won't mention that's an etching because all of these will be etchings. I very often incorporate my family into the works. My husband, the lower left, my grandchildren along the bottom, and then random people. It's a subject that's very dear to me. I love to do this. And I love to see the flowers. They are majestic. Next. Yeah. This is kind of a, I don't want to say an anti-war, but it's a little architectural piece of what was destroyed, the ancient architecture in Palmyra of the beautiful buildings that have been there for thousands of years really disturbed and affected me deeply. So I memorialized 3 of them that are gone with this red gash going right through it. And then moving into a different mode here. This is called The Mob, New York. I had an uncle who was a gangster, little Uncle Abe. And so I've been into that theme. I've got the mob in Chicago and I've got the mob in New York with various men dressed in the 20s and 30s. And it kind of amuses me. And speaking of men, this is called the bodybuilding contest. And this was done on a rainy night in Elizabeth at the Ritz Theater, where my friend took me on a gloomy, rainy winter night so that we could cheer each other up and laugh. And I have a few autographed photographs of these men who were quite delightful. It was quite an anatomical study. And being a life anatomy and life drawing instructor, you can see why that was drawn to me. I'm skipping around with lots of subject and lots of mood, but that's kind of the way I think it would be most fun to see it. This one is a portrait of Emily Dickinson, and around it are her poems, which I photostated on little bits of colored paper using her stamps and her handwriting, and made this collage. And it's just called Emily. It's a little bit of a nostalgic piece. It should resonate with you, Erna, up there in Massachusetts. Have you been to her home? Well, I guess I can't speak to any. Okay. This one is my father-in-law, and it's called The Deposition. And
Helen, Erna nodded, okay?
oh, okay.
Okay, I'll just let you know any feedback you get. Okay, I'm
Okay.
going back on mute now.
Okay. Am I going too quickly?
No one has said anything, so I think you're doing fine. I'm going to mute now.
Okay. This one is called The Deposition. And it was Sid's father when he was in the Workman's Circle home in Elizabeth. He had been involved in a lawsuit many, many years ago, and he was the last man standing to get a witness. So the lawyers came and visited him in this little old Jewish place, and everybody was staring at the men and the black cars and the briefcases and wondering what is going on with Phil Frank. So, and you can see the stenographer is at the lower left, and my father-in-law in a little, he dressed for the occasion with his little pink sweater. It's a one that's very personal and certainly touches me quite a lot. Going to a very different place. This is welcoming my grandson, Jackson, and it's called Jack and His Outfits. So you can see all the little clothes. I love the idea of cutouts and miniatures, and that's an idealized takeoff on a little Italian putti, and the clothes are all his clothes. He's not too fond of it, as you would imagine, but maybe when he's 50, he'll like it a little bit more. I hope so. This is a rather rare landscape of the Pulaski Skyway, and you can see the birds in the foreground hiding in the vegetation, and the beautiful Skyway. I've always loved that piece of bridge. Not much to say about it. It is what it is. It's an interesting etching, 2-color etching. And not far from there, this is the entrance to the Lincoln Tunnel. You can see the traffic in the foreground and the little houses on top of the wall there, the main wall, which has always fascinated me. Every time the bus would go around the curve, I would take another picture of it. And finally, I just had to do it to get it out of my system. But guess what? I'm still taking pictures of it.
Actually, Helen, I have a request to
Yes.
show the Pulaski Skyway again, because
Yes.
it was so fast.
Okay, here it comes.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah.
As you can see, the Skyway and some of the buildings are in the background, and all the vegetation. We took a very interesting little boat ride through the waterways there, and there are many wild animals and birds. It's a wonderful place to poke around. Very interesting. It's full of New Jersey nature.
Thank you. Thank you.
This one came, it's an unusual one because the title came before the art. The title is The Day Before Tuesday. And of course, the Tuesday refers to 9/11. And I somehow wanted to depict the end of being carefree in the world through my niece and my granddaughter, holding hands and skipping through. I did quite a few things for about 9/11. The firefighters, which is in the New York Historical Society in their permanent collection. And then my husband and I went down to a restaurant called Nino's, which was about less than a mile away from the World Trade Center. And we volunteered and fed the volunteers. And I did some paintings of that, which I cannot put my hands in now, but if anybody's interested, I will dig them up. Okay, we'll go on to something else. This one is in a completely different vein. It's called The Rabbi Study, and it's Rabbi Herb Weiner, who is a friend of our families. And you can see the wonderful objects in his study with his books and his etchings of other rabbis. This piece here is a book press and quite recognizable things, but it made a very beautiful pattern and really a portrait of a man. As I said, we're jumping around with lots of things. These are my friends. This is called Hold Still, with the father cutting his son's toenails. That son is now about 30 and about to be married. So I don't think his father does that anymore, but I quit the moment, that moment. This is the etching of the drawing of the firefighters from 9/11. And it's got a lot of movement. I've indicated Dante's Circle of Hell a little bit in the foreground. And now we're on vacation. It's called Pine View, and that was the name of the motel, the motor court. I always loved the little idea of your own little tiny house in a row of other houses with nature and the woods. I'm not terribly comfortable in nature, so I make it rather ominous, but I did like the neon lights lighting up the ground and the little lights coming from the cabins. So this was from a trip to Austria, and we went and visited Sigmund Freud's home apartment, and the name of this piece is called The Celebrated Couch of Sigmund Freud. And as you well know, he was a collector of antiquities, so I've got that in his beautiful oriental rugs and pillows and his objects. It was a wonderful atmospheric place to visit.
Helen, put that back up because we've got two comments.
Yes.
Okay, can you put the Freud piece back up? Okay, so one comment is what a wonderful image it is. And then there's another, back to Pine View. Could you put Pine View back up? Because there's a question about how you achieved the three-dimensional quality. And so I think we all just want to look at it, and I don't think this is a technical question. I think it's more an appreciative. Oh my goodness, how did you get that to be so three-dimensional?
Well, it's called perspective, I think, of the perspective of the houses where some are on angles.
Depth of tone, Mom.
What, right?
Depth of tone.
Oh, depth of, my son is prompting me. Depth of tone, doesn't that sound wonderful? Most everything has the third dimension in it. You're just not as aware of it as you are in this one. And I think that here it's a very dramatic statement about it. I mean, particularly aside from the little cottages, the suggestion of the flight of the birds here, sort of hovering of stuff going on in this in this forest, almost the forest medieval a little bit.
Actually, here's another comment coming in about how when you move the etching, it makes it look like the houses are moving relative to the forest. There's some way that it just creates that impression. And then another comment is about how this paint, really pulsates. You know, there's a pulsing quality. I can see that too.
What quality, Suzanne?
A pulse, like it pulsates.
Okay, oh, pulsing, yes.
Yeah.
You sure that's not the paper moving?
No.
It's a combination, because even just moving the paper wouldn't be sufficient. There is something about the perspective, and as Roger was saying, the depth of tone.
Well, I would hope that when you go traveling in the backwoods of New York State or Kentucky or wherever, you'll take
We just lost what you said.
to know to look at motor courts. I think that's what a motor trip, a ride through New York State or Kentucky or wherever, and you come across these little country motel places with the neon signs. You'll take note of it, and perhaps you might have driven right past it. And I think that that's really one of the roles of the artist, is to point out many unseen things, or things that people don't notice particularly, and make art out of it.
Yeah, and one other comment about that is that the houses seem to just pop out of the scene. It's really very impressive.
Thank you, thank you. This is kind of a it's a takeoff on the Shakespeare, The 7 Ages of Man, where I used my grandson, starting as a little boy at the beach, and then an adolescent, and then as a lover, and then as a confident Hawaiian shirted man, then as getting a little bent over, and then not being able to walk very well and lying on the beach covered up, and then the big horizon. So I did one of the 7 Ages of Women too, but I thought this would be more interesting.
Oh, we've got another question.
Yeah.
And that is, I tell you, that pine crest really elicited a lot of thoughts. And that is, could you say something more about your response to nature? You made a very provocative comment there when you said you're not too comfortable in nature.
Well, no, there are artists who specialize in certain things. I won't say that I do, but you will rarely see a landscape from me. The landscape will contain like the entrance to the Lincoln Tunnel. It will have the houses and the cars. It will have bits and pieces of people, and how people relate to their environment. I'm not a nature painter. I can be out in the most beautiful scene and have no desire to ever replicate it. I think it's not replicable, if there is such a word. I'm a city person. I'm a people person. Interiors, things that people love, things that people touch, places that they go, places that they make, environments that they make. But I cannot think of any pure landscape that I've ever done. Now watch, we'll turn up one in the monotypes, but from this point of view, I'm nervous in nature. I don't like the sounds of it. I'm always looking around to see if something wild is going to jump out. That's kind of, I hope that's a good explanation.
Thank you, Helen. And actually, you continue, there are a couple of more comments that have just come in before you explain this work. And one is the way that the bright cheeriness of the cabins seem to triumph over the darkness of the background. So that's kind of picking up.
Yes.
Picking up on your theme. And then another comment was that Freud's room, the question was the couch really the only colorful object in the room, or did you colorize it to emphasize the couch?
It was the only colorful object, The rest of the room were grays and beiges, um, and I would say more somber colors, which made the couch more exquisite
Yeah.
and full of pattern and full of design. Um, Maybe if you were lying on that couch, you would start to talk and not stop.
That did happen. So now another comment, and I tell you, people keep seeing more and more in your Pine View work. In Pine View, did you intentionally make the trees more blurry than the precise images of the home?
Yes, absolutely.
Create that perspective and depth of field.
Absolutely. Very, very good comment, because I wasn't focusing on the trees. The trees were putting it in a setting, and to use your word, atmosphere. The focus of it were the little cabins and the sign and the color. The trees had to be there because that was information. It was saying, this is on a country road. The actual place that it was Maine. And it was kind of a memory of places that I stayed with my family when I was little. And we would all crowd, of course, into one cabin. Two cabins were too expensive, and my sister and I wouldn't dream of being alone in the woods, and the scary woods. Yes, the trees were intentionally a design. If you are looking and holding the etching, you'll see that there's a lot of variety in the trees in the background. And that's done. And as I said earlier, I'm not going to go into techniques because they're kind of boring if you're not a printmaker, but it's called a sheen collé.
Want to
And,
show an example, Mom?
well, I don't know if you could, can you see that the trunk of the trees are here? Are you able to
Yes.
see that?
Yes.
And you see the light coming through and the little halo around the
Yeah.
sign. So it's all this is needed, and the scale of it, the size of it, the enormity of the scary woods and the tininess. So I push perspective in both directions. One, making the little cabins smaller than they actually would be, and making the trees more mysterious and more ominous than they really are. And that's kind of what art is,
That's right.
to give drama, to exaggerate, to get your point across. Any other questions about this?
No, but you certainly have evoked a number of reflections on this piece particularly. Thank you.
Well, I think you will like the next one. Wait, we have to have Roger hold it for you. It's called, the name of it is, are you able to see all of it? It's called Confession. And I did this in, of course, Italy. And I loved the idea of waiting in line and going into a little house, and there would be somebody in that house, and you would sit and you would tell that person all the things that you would never tell anybody else. And I was a little envious of the people making confession, but I was also amused that they could be so absolved by simply doing that. So this is my, I won't say tongue in cheek, but it really is. I've got the little angels here, and I've got the various people bored, interested, being dragged along into the confessional box. I must tell you that I almost got online myself because I did want to do that. But propriety kept me from doing it.
We're shifting gears.
All
Mom?
right, now wait, did you finish with the etchings? I don't think so.
No, but there's not enough time. You want to do these?
Oh,
Yeah. Yeah.
Actually, yeah, we have another half hour. Yeah.
well, I think at this point, I'm going to switch to the drawings and the monotypes. And I'm going to show you both. The drawing is, I use oil on very fine paper. And I used to do many canvases, but became quite bored with that medium, and I love the feel of paper. So everything that I'm showing you is on beautiful handmade paper. This one is called the claw, and it must be familiar to most of you. It's a metaphor for life. You put the quarter in and the claw comes down, and what is it going to grab? If anything, it's the game. It's a true game of chance. As you probably know, I love this kind of tinsely amusement park environment. The show that I'm going to be having at my gallery in October will have things like wildwood, that kind of thing. I do like that subject. This next one is part of a grant from Union County. It's very old, but it was before tattoos were popular. And I went and found a tattoo parlor with the owner, who was kind enough to pose for me. And I did that from life, meaning that I brought my paints down into his parlor and painted him. So he's got some wonderful tattoos. And they're a little carried away now, I think. This one is my comment about the oil spill. It's called Oil Spill. It was done in 2010. I forget whatever spill was happening then, but I was very moved by the poor birds and the people who were cleaning the oil off of them and how many died. And so the feathers are embossed into the paper, and then I painted around it. So. This one is my granddaughter, who's been a huge subject for me. She's now 30, but she was, I think I documented her entire life. This is called the strawberry. The little girl eating the strawberries. This is another kid's one. I mean, out of Salisbury Cathedral with, and the children were having sack races. And I could have told this one so many times, and each time I would bring it out, I would say, no, no, no. And I would put it in the back and not show it, but I'm showing it to you guys. The next one is a little complex combination here. It's called Ancient Women, and they're one. Are you able to see that?
Yeah, they can see, Mom. Just
This is on paper that I marbled the paper. And then I found, I did a lot of marbling on paper and found subjects that would fit it. And this is a series of ancient women in different poses. And there's a little bit of gold leaf in there. It's a nice combination of a lot of media, which is the plural of medium, as you know. This one is the symphony. My printer, I have two printers that I work with when things get too large for my 5 feet inches. And it's a roll of color and then an etching printed over it. It's called the orchestra. I like very simple titles for my work. Except for the COVID one, which I felt needed a long one. But you can see that it's got a beautiful roll. This man is a master printer.
Helen, I've got one other comment, and that was how gorgeous. Let's see, I think that was in response to the marbling.
Oh, yes, yes.
Yeah, it was such a gorgeous, it was just so gorgeous.
This is kind of a rare abstract design of Brooklyn Heights, where I took a walking tour of it. I went to Cooper Union and spent a lot of time downtown on the Lower East Side and sort of carried it over to Brooklyn. I love architectural detail. And as you've seen enough of my work now to see why I was very intrigued with the various facades of some brownstones and some more elaborate architecture. It's just a different note of mine. It's just a different way to go.
Okay, Helen, stop one moment because there's another comment coming in. Oh, I'm sorry. A correction. So gorgeous was the one about your granddaughter, the strawberry.
Oh, the strawberry, thank you.
And then there's another one about the ancient women. Were there particular inspirations for each woman?
Yes, I had a period in my life in my 40s where for some very strange reason, 4 of my close friends who were also in their 40s died. And this is kind of an homage to them. So they are particular people to me, but they don't look like anybody. They're not portraits in any way. It was just a piece that was done out of the loss that I felt for my friends. Of course, then it's happening all over again, but nobody's getting an homage at this point.
Thank you, Roger, for showing that in a slower pace so that we can actually see them.
Sure.
You'll be amused by this one. It's called Match.com. And what it is my children decided that I was alone and I needed a companion and they would take care of this for me. So they put me on Match.com, which I thought was hysterical. And every night I would look at the responses and I sketched the men as I saw them. And then I wrote down comments. The faces do not match up with the comments. I just took what I thought were the best faces and the best comments. And I'll just read you a few. This gentleman was born in Ireland and he's not looking for a platonic relationship. And this one, Big Daddy says, it's hard to believe in God, but if you don't mind, I don't mind. And then this man, and of course, so many of these men were ancient and I wouldn't exactly call them godlike men. This man says he's looking for a female who makes me hear bells. So their requirements are really quite high. Mr. Spudman says he's a passionate man. And the art lover, I eat and drink with nutrition. And here's one who's put a caveat on it. He calls himself cheerful and no walkers, wheelchairs, or canes. So, and then there's one here, I think it's in this one. Oh, this one, this funny man, he wants a slim and blonde young woman. And Artie doesn't want any pets. And Fred here says, doesn't have to be Jewish. So anyway, that's my comment on being a widow. It's one of my comments, my less serious one. I don't know if any of you are from around here or having grown up here, but there was an amusement park in Irvington called Olympic Park, and it was a German beer garden with a wonderful bar and a bandstand that played oompa music and a swimming pool. And we were not allowed to go in because of the polio scare. This was, of course, before the Salk. And this was just a memory of the bar, which I don't know why I picked that because I certainly wasn't old enough to be at a bar. but the red impressed me. I did buy the bandstand and came home and told Sid that I had bought it. And he was in shock and he told me to unbuy it because where would we put it? I thought we'd put it in the backyard. I'm still sorry I listened to him. This one is a monotype, meaning that there's just one. Very briefly, a monotype is painted on plastic or glass, and then it's put through an etching press. So you get accidentals. And as I say, I don't want to start talking about technique. I'd rather stay with content, but I just want to show you that these are monotype kind of lines. This was a memory. I had a good friend whose parents had a condominium in Acapulco in the 50s and 60s and 70s. And I went down there a lot and did a lot of painting and sketching. And this little girl, this is called Sunday Morning in San Girolamo. And I just loved her spunky little spirit walking in the old town all by herself, so sure of where she's going. She kind of became an inspiration for me. That little girl is probably a grandma by now. This is another oil on paper. We have good friends in Providence, and one of she was my student, and we're very good friends. And one of the things that we like to do is get Chinese food and drive around and look at the architecture, and then stop and photograph and sketch. And we stopped in front of this house, which I loved. And this little girl came to the window and she pulled the drape aside and stood there for a moment and then disappeared. And I really thought that she just came out so that I could see her and paint her. I felt, wasn't that nice you did that for me? Which of course is not true, but I like to think of it as true.
Helen, I've got another comment that the girl is painted with layers of colors, not quite in registration, your Sunday morning. And the comment is an observation, is more about technique, but it seems to be a favorite technique of yours. This is a comment.
It's actually not in layers. It's just it's a very simple, direct blob of vermilion paint with little arms and legs. Because when you look closely at my work, so much of it is gestural. And that got the gesture as to use the least amount is one of my goals. To say the most with the least is one of the things I try to do. Of course, when I'm working, I don't think about all these things. Now here comes a large etching called Angels in the Ocean. And again, I've incorporated my grandchildren and my nieces and nephews, who I'm very, very close to. And we would spend summers at the beach. And they knew that one of the obligations that they had to me was that they would have to pose. So there was no negotiating that. But there's a lot of fun technique going on here. And again, my printer printed this. You can see it's beautifully printed. When you print an etching, you don't crank it out like in a pasta machine. Each plate is inked once, put through the press, printed, taken off, and re-inked. So a piece this large, 1824, would probably take about an hour to print it. This is after the design is done. And it's done on copper.
Helen, there are a couple comments, and they're relevant to this. It says that you capture emotion so well with just a few lines. And then the other comment is that both the children and the water are swirling.
Yes, they are. They're caught in the waves. They're caught up in their own lives. And the waves are going to just, each one is going to be tossed around in a different way. And that remains to be seen about how, I do like this piece. I think I've given it to the kids, but I sort of can't keep track. They all have a lot of my work. This is my time at the Hawaiian Summit, where nothing is sacred. This is it's called Conversation in the Sauna. And I also did an etching of this. I love to see women in intimate conversations, in secrets and quiet places, wrapped in towels, relaxing. It's all wonderful fun for me. What's this guy's name, Roger?
Hannes Wagner.
This is a takeoff on the most expensive baseball card. It's of Honus Wagner, but the actual card is only maybe 1.5 inches by 2 inches. So I did a great huge takeoff using the colors and that kind of dopey expression on his face. He played for Pittsburgh. But it's again, it was printed with my printer, who helps me with the large pieces. So I have a date with my printer Monday, and I will start to gather all the things that I'm going to need tomorrow. This is a very, very new one. I will give you the title of it. It's called Everything Passes. Wait. Everything Passes Except Memory. And what the inspiration for this was, when I was a little girl coming home from New York after visiting grandma, in Secaucus and on old Route 1, there were, and near Newark Airport, there were Hooverville houses, which I'm sure you all know what they were. And I was intrigued, not so differently in emotion from the motel, but I was intrigued with the little houses and the little fires and lamps. Of course, I was 3 or 4. I had no idea that they were desperate and homeless. So what this is a memory of Hooverville by Newark Airport. These are weeds and stalks. I found myself, I was looking for just the right kind, and I found them, and I realized I was on somebody's lawn cutting down one of her bushes, not realizing what I was doing, so I quickly left. But I laid down the vegetation and did a monotype and a painting of this. And I did a series of 4 of them. So this is kind of interesting.
Helen, I've got another comment for you.
Yes.
It's a couple questions. How
Yes.
did you escape being taught to color within the lines? Did you never use coloring books?
Never. But I'm going to interrupt and tell you a funny story. My gallery called and said that he had just sold one of my large pieces, and this woman brought the painting home. Her husband was away, and she said she would like to keep the painting until her husband came back and they could buy it together. So he did, and they're deciding to get it. And her 5-year-old kid calls her in to his bedroom and says, "Mommy, I don't want you to buy that painting." And she said, "Why not?" He said, "She didn't stay in the lines." So this is a very new one. This is an etching, and it's called American Artists. And each one is, yeah, that's right. That's good. And I don't know how many you'll recognize, but they're all famous paintings by famous Americans. And I did have the ego to put myself in here, since the Met just acquired one of my drawings. So it's a fun one. It's very laborious again to print. When I finish creating, and I have to make an edition, I sort of lose interest And that's when I have my printers. This is a fun one from Coney Island. Again, I've got the same kids. The kids are omniscious. And this is the big merry-go, not the merry-go, the
Ferris wheel.
Ferris wheel from Coney Island, which has given me a lot of subject matter. Now, how much, Suzanne, how much time do we have? Or do I have?
I had to unmute. How about just maybe one or two more, and then we should wrap up so we can have time to check, for
All right.
conversation.
What I'm gonna do is just show you a few miniature etchings. Over here. Okay. I'll just take a couple. Wait, unhook these. Well, let's do these three. Those three. I can't put my hands on them, Suzanne, so I'll just show a few more. This, of course, we all know what that is. The New Jersey bagel and cream cheese and lox. And that's as close to a still life. This next one, just before Waldorf closed, my daughter and I spent a few nights there. And this is the lobby of people going in and out of that very famous, wonderful place, of catching all the different types of people. And I guess the last one, this is Fifth Avenue and 59th Street with the Plaza Hotel and looking down. My niece has an office there, and she's given me a lot of subject matter being high up. So I think that that's a cross sampling of a little bit of my work.
Okay, Helen, I'm going to stop the recording.
Right.
Okay, so let me stop